Hi, everyone. Welcome to Story Time. I am Dr. Jennifer Bird. I'm a biblical scholar, and I care very much about what people do with what they find in the Bible. And I am not able to stream from home today from my office, so I came to see if I can study this here. I came to my favorite Starbucks. It's the Starbucks where, sorry, I don't know if I can hold it still here. It's the Starbucks where I wrote most of Marriage in the Bible. So there are some friendly people here, friendly baristas, I know, since I was kind of a regular here for 6 or 7 months or something. Anyway, let's see. So what we're doing today is mostly the story about Isaac, but I realized I needed to read chapter 20 as well of Genesis. I'm just going to jump right in to doing story time instead of doing any of the chit chat ahead of time. So glad that some of you are able to be with me today and join us for this live stream to chat amongst yourselves here. I'm just going to pause. The Starbucks is busy enough on the inside that I didn't want to be inside, so it's only 90 degrees here. It's okay. I'll be fine, but I will be sweating. Okay, so thank you for joining us if you're able to and wanted to be here. And thank you for all the ways that you all support me in the work I'm doing. I very much appreciate that. So let's just jump right in. Let me find, they've changed things here in StreamYard, so if you're having to roll with some new things here. Let's see. Why is it not showing it? There we go. Okay. And this is really interesting. Okay. I think it's my laptop. It's an old one. And so I think we'll have all kinds of issues today. So we're all just going to roll with it today, right? Oh, that's funny. Thank you for the comment, Anina. Yeah, what's up with that? I don't know if I can fix that right now, but I appreciate knowing that. Let's see. All right. It's just going to have to do that for today, I think. It's very interesting. Wonder how that happened. Okay. So, so we needed to read chapter 20, partly because it's not just the whole thing with Abram and Sarah and Gerar, but also the thing with Abimelech at the end of the chapter that's relevant in part of chapter 21. And it just seemed weird to not read it. Even though this live stream is labeled that we're just doing Isaac's story. So I'm going to back up and do all of 20 as well. So here we are in Genesis chapter 20, and we'll do chapters 20, 21, and 22 today, because that's the thing about Isaac and his situation. 21 and 22. Okay, so chapter 20. So this is right after the story about Sodom, right? Sodom and Gomorrah. So from there, we're talking about whatever they had to do. I mean, they're not really mentioned in chapter 20. In 18, where Abram argues with God about sparing the city. So anyway, from there, Abram journeyed toward the region of the Negev and settled between Kadesh and Shur. While residing in Gerar as an alien, Abram said of his woman, Sarah, she is my sister. And King Abimelech of Gerar sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night, which we do need to clarify because not all dreams happen at night, and said to him, "You are about to die because of the woman whom you've taken, for she is a married woman." I meant to look that up, actually, in the Hebrew before we started and got thrown because of the whole connection issue. Lack of connectivity there at home. Let's see. What is it actually saying in the Hebrew? For she is the end of verse 3. Asher Laka. About to die because of the woman you've taken. So, Vahi Ba'ulat. Yeah, Baal. So, the language being used in the Hebrew is about she's a she is one who has been lorded over. it's I mean, again, there's no language for marriage in the Hebrew Bible. The way we use it. Anyway, okay, that's a very interesting description of her. Now Abimelech had not approached her, right? So the narrator is telling us a very different story than the one in Egypt, right? So he said, Lord, will you destroy an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, she is my sister? And she herself said, he is my brother. I did this in the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands. It's also interesting that to say that the king is going to die will also destroy the people. I just think that's kind of funny. And God said to him in the dream, so he's having a back and forth in a dream, or does he have a dream one night and then the next night he comes back and I don't know. Anyway, yes, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart. Furthermore, it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. So very interesting. So very interesting. Now then, return the man's woman, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not restore her, know that you shall surely die, you and all that are yours. Okay. Yes, she is property, right? It's just very interesting the way that God is depicted in this story. Anyway, okay, let's just keep going. So Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told them all these things. And the men were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abram and said to him, what have you done to us? How have I sinned against you that you have brought such great guilt on me and my kingdom? You have done things to me that ought not to be done. And Abimelech said to Abraham, what were you thinking that you did this thing? Abram said, I did it because I thought, surely there's no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my woman. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my woman. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, this is the kindness you must do me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother. We're going to pause on this for a minute. One thing I want to point out is that when I have students write a letter from Sarah to Abraham or Sarai to Abram, I do it based on chapter 12 of Genesis, which we read a couple weeks ago. And it's where, they do the same thing, but it's pretty clear that she does have to have sex with a Pharaoh. And he does say that you're my, says that she's his sister, but, it's according to the narrative, there's no reason to think that's actually true, right? And so, because I have so many students who are familiar with this story, with the scriptures, with Genesis in general, will say, they'll import what they know about chapter 20 into their engagement in chapter 12, right? And make all these comments about, well, but they are siblings, half siblings, whatever. No, that's just in Genesis 20, a different version of the same story, right? It's a very different, tone. I think it is from a different tradition entirely. Anyway, I don't know that for sure. I'd have to go look at the way God is named in chapter 12, but. So anyway, so I just find it really interesting, and it's not a surprise that people do that, right? But it's just worth pointing out that you know, when you don't understand what's going on in these writings, right, it's easy to do that kind of conflating, not realizing it's not appropriate to do that, right? Um, a couple other things I want to point out, which is this line about surely there's no fear of God in this place. That's a really interesting thing to be saying in general, because there are gods who are feared, right, throughout Palestine at that point in time, right? So it's a weird, it's just not this particular God, which does make it seem a little bit later of a tradition to me. But anyway, um, doesn't matter. Okay, and then of course this thing about this claim that they had made this pact from the very beginning of their travels, that anytime they enter someplace new, they'll make this claim, right? Um, you know, Perhaps some revisionary writing of the story, right, is happening long after the telling of the story with Pharaoh. So anyway, so apparently has made this forced her to make this kind of a claim. Oh, there's one of those lantern flies that we're supposed to unalive when we see them. Okay, so I'm going to come back over here, see if there's anything I'm missing in terms of. Yeah, that's really kind of funny. Becca Eller's comment. I love that his answers. She's also my sister. Incest as a plot device is biblical, right? Um, we need to give soap operas more slack. Okay, so all this, he says all these things to the king, and Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male and female slaves and gave them to Abraham and restored his woman Sarah to him. Similar, not maybe not as extensive, but similar gifting that Pharaoh gave him, apparently. Abimelech said, "My land is before you. Settle where it pleases you." To Sarah, he said, "Look, I've given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is your exoneration before all who are with you. You are completely vindicated." Also, a very interesting thing to be saying, as if they actually cared about women's bodies in that kind of a way, for her to be vindicated that she wasn't actually touched. Um, there's that. Then there's also just the fact that um, it doesn't matter. Okay, it's just very fascinating, right? It's very, it reads to me very much like we're making up for something here. We're very much trying to cover up something that was said before, trying to prove that it was wrong or whatever. I'm so sorry. Oh, okay, we're having an infestation of these lantern flies. Sorry. Okay. My land is before you. Settle where it pleases you. Um, so many things we could talk about in terms of narratives and this issue of this particular piece of land that has been, quote unquote, promised to Abram and his descendants, and yet others are living there already. Um, in this story, right, they're being allowed to settle in amongst the people already living there. Um, I don't know. It's just very all the pieces. I don't know. All the pieces are just interesting to me. Okay, so Abram prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech. We didn't know anything about him not being well, did we? And also healed his wife and female slaves so that they bore children. For the Lord had closed fast all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abram's woman. Um, yes, we could have a little bit of a heyday with that. I'm going to hang up here a second. Got somebody coming in. Loud engines. Let me just come back over here to say hi, see what chat I'm missing. Um, uh, Okay. All right. Sorry about all the background noise. I guess it just makes for a very different experience today. All right. So chapter 21 then is Isaac's story specifically. So wait. Right, a couple chapters ago is when the visitors came, right, and said that she would be pregnant. Okay, so the Lord dealt with Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to his son, whom Sarah bore him. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Now, Sarah said, God has brought laughter for me, yet everyone who hears will laugh with me. And she said, who would ever have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age, not in my old age, in his old age. Anyway, um, the miraculousness of these births, right? That um, the the line in Genesis chapter 3:16 that talks about women having suffering in childbirth. I know I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again in case you haven't seen that or heard it before. But I've always taken that to mean pain in childbirth, as in childbirth is challenging for most women, not all, and that's what that line is about. That there'll be pain in childbirth, but the language in the Hebrew is actually more about the suffering that comes with the whole realm of bearing children and trying to have children, and that larger picture of the struggle of women, the suffering of women who aren't able to conceive because that's their main role in this kind of a culture and society. Um, and it's important for the survival of the family line and all the stuff, whatever. So there is there's true suffering that comes with women not being able to perform the role they've been told they need to perform, right? And as well as for many women suffering just because they want children and aren't able to have them, that kind of thing. So I think that reading of Genesis 3:16 makes more sense in terms of that's what we see in every generation in Genesis. Is every generation the women struggle to conceive, or the right women according to the narrative, right? Sarah's not able to conceive, so they they use Hagar, the woman who's enslaved to them, and she pops them right out, right? But anyway, Rachel, the one that Jacob loves, right, is not able to, right? So, and Rebecca not able to initially, and Sarah, of course, here was not able to till her old age. So this whole issue of the struggle around that, I think it's an interesting piece of the story that, for better and worse, is still a thing that women struggle with, right? Women who desire children and aren't able to have them. That's a serious struggle to this day, right? And culturally, too many women are told that that's their main role or that that's their primary role in this world, still to this day. But I just think it's interesting that this piece of the story has always been true, right, for humanity, and it's somewhat subsumed, even though it's key to the whole narrative, right? The women, their struggle, even here, Sarah, what she's saying isn't even about her. Who would ever have said to Abram that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. And she's the one that it's a miraculous thing that she's bearing a child in her old age, right? Anyway, okay. So here we get the next layer of women contending with each other, and this is part of what patriarchy does to women, right? This whole, instead of being a sisterhood, it's competitiveness, or there's jealousy, instead of a common bond, right? Okay. So the child grew and was weaned. And Abram made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, playing. And the Hebrew here doesn't have that phrase with her son Isaac. It just says playing. It's the Greek Septuagint that actually has it, playing with her son Isaac. I could see, either one works, right? But adding that phrase with her playing with her son also intensifies the concern on her part, right? That he's interacting with, and they're creating a bond, or potentially is he going to play safely with my son? I don't know. There are all kinds of things there, but so either way, we can see how that's a setup for what she says next. And again, I think it's really important that we read all of these interactions, both what Sarah says and does, how she treats Hagar and Ishmael, like that we see that all through the lens of what the patriarchal society is compels her to do, how she's been trained by it, how she might be envious or jealous and not want to share with a whole nother line of people. So, I have students who comment, they say, well, it was Sarah's idea to have Abram sleep with Hagar. I'm like, yeah, it's not really Hagar. It wasn't really Sarah's idea. Right? This is a compulsory thing, right? The struggle was real, and that was the only solution, kind of thing, in her mind. Anyway, okay, so sorry, I'm trying to hold it still here. Okay, so when she saw this, she said to Abraham, "Cast out this slave woman with her son." You can just see her pointing at them. "Cast out the slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not inherit along with my son Isaac." The matter was very distressing to Abraham on account of his son. Another thing that I had a student point out to me is the way that the narrative makes it sound like Abraham does only have one son after this story, like after they get rid of him. But he does have two sons. He has two sons, not his only son. Right? He has two sons. And right now he's still being considered Abraham's son, right? It was distressing to Abraham to have to think about separating from his son, not having to do this, having to cut himself off from this particular son. But God said to Abraham, "Do not be distressed because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for it is through Isaac that offspring shall be named for you. As for the son of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him also, because he is your offspring." Again, I just have all these fun comments or fun thoughts that keep popping in my head, that things that students say, and I meant to look this up before we went live, but this letter to Sarah, from Sarah to Abraham, pushes people to think about the story in ways that they hadn't before. And one of the students made a comment about how interesting it is. What does it say about this God, that he's going to stake everything he has in the life of this one man, Abraham? He said it was really a clever wording, and sorry, I didn't have time to go look that up. Okay. So interesting, right? That because he's your offspring, I will honor him and make a nation of him also, right? So thinking of Ishmael. But also we could, think about women who, men who have children outside of their primary relationship, right? So outside of marriage or whatever, right? A man who cheats on his marriage, cheats on the woman he's married to, and has a child with someone else. How is that child and that family regarded and respected? It's kind of an interesting parallel there, I think. Anyway, so Abram rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she cast the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him, a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot. For she said, "Do not let me look on the death of my child, on the death of the child." And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. Oof. Are you picturing it? And then this next line always makes me almost trip in my head. And God heard the voice of the boy, not the voice of a Hagar who's just mourning, wailing. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Do not be afraid, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is." Not your voice wailing and lamenting, right? "Come, lift up the boy and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make a great nation of him." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. Obviously, people do like to point out she's the first. She's the first person that we see. She's the first female that we see the Lord speaking to in the narrative. Other times, it's, it's said that the Lord spoke to him, but it doesn't have him speaking. Although Abimelech in the dream, right? God spoke to him. Anyway, it's kind of an interesting, intimate moment, and he's disregarding her pain and her wailing and her voice that she lifted up. Because the males, matter more. Anyway, God opened her eyes. She saw a well of water. She went, filled the skin with water, gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother got a woman for him from the land of Egypt, where she came from, most likely, right? I also think it's interesting. He became an expert with a bow. We just had a reference to she was a bow shot off. What is that? I wonder what that could be telling us about the people who collected the story or whatever. Anyway, so we're still with the same. We're still in the same area, right? Abraham went to the region of Gerar or the town of Gerar, and is interacting with Abimelech, and then having this moment with Hagar, Ishmael, and at that time Abimelech. So they're still in the same region, right? With Phicol, I should look up that name in the Hebrew, but anyway, with Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, "God is with you in all that you do. Now, therefore, swear to me here, by God, that you will not deal falsely with me, or with my offspring, or with my posterity, but as I have dealt loyally with you, you will deal with me, and with the land where you have resided as an alien." And Abraham said, "I swear it." So Abimelech knows that Abraham's already lied to him, right? In that whole thing over Sarah. We already know, as listeners of the story, readers of the story, that Abraham is actually lying again, right? Because Abraham has a promise he's been given that this land will actually be his, or his descendants, right? So he's actually lying again when he swears it. Um, and also this whole thing, God is with you in all that you do. This people kissing up, right? Anyway, when Abraham complained to Abimelech, again, I meant to look at the Hebrew. Is it when or then, right, in the Hebrew? Like, anyway, so when Abraham complained to Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized, um, I wonder if that's actually that they had cut off the access to the water in that well by filling it, which was one of the things people would do in wartime, a way to kind of undermine your enemy is to cut off their water supply that way. It's just maybe I was just wondering as I was kind of preparing for today. But anyway, Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this. You did not tell me, and I have not heard of it until today. So this next part is so weird to me. And then we'll get on to Isaac's story, the rest of Isaac's story. Abraham took sheep and oxen, so some of what Abimelech had given him, right, and gave them to Abimelech. And the two men made a covenant. Okay, what is that covenant? Abraham set apart 7 ewe lambs of the flock. And Abimelech said to Abraham, what is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs that you have set apart? And he said, these 7 ewe lambs you shall accept from my hand, in order that you may be a witness for me that I dug this well. I just think it's the weirdest thing ever. Fully retrospectively claiming to be the one to have dug this well, whether or not you were. I don't know. I have so many questions. Anyway, but then also forcing him to take this gift. So he's being paid to lie or to establish an idea. Like, it's just so weird to me. Anyway, therefore, that place was called Beersheba, which is, depends, there are a couple different ways you can inflect the Hebrew there. A well of 7 or well of the oath. Because there, both of them swore an oath. When they had made a covenant at Beersheba, Abimelech, with Phicol, the commander of his army, left and returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham resided as an alien many days in the land of the Philistines. We're gonna come back over here and see what chatter I'm missing. I need to have a little weigh in on the chat. It's like Elon buying out the founders of Tesla. All the transactions between Abraham and Abimelech are like that. In response to Abraham is such a duplicitous jerk. It's so strange that these founding patriarchs are so glorified when they are really such their own story. I fully agree, Becca. I fully agree. This is an important question, actually. The Philistines weren't even there during the time Abram ostensibly lived, were they? Actually, who were the Philistines, right? Are they the people of the sea? Which is one of the derivations or one of the possible meanings of the name. And are they people that had migrated or immigrated from the west, so from over by the smaller seas around, the Adriatic or Aegean or whatever, instead of the Mediterranean. But so they're people from far away or from another land who had relocated to that swath, that piece of land, and what is the date, the dating of that relocation? Um, I mean, I actually don't know how early that would have been. Um, I know that there were peoples on the coasts of Asia Minor in 1200 BCE who were great, big, who were well established peoples. Um, but that's not as early as this story is placed, right? The story is placed as being around 1800 BCE. Um, but I think it's reasonable to say that. Well, anyway, so I can't speak. I can't speak to that. I don't know for sure. Um, David too, and I think that's, I think that's, yeah, I think that's an interesting point as well. We're just talking about how, yeah, yeah, it is interesting how many issues these patriarchs. Becca said it very nicely. Sorry, sorry, sorry for all the background noise. Okay, but yeah, it is interesting how badly all of these patriarchs behave, right? Abraham in particular, right? I mean, it's in the very first chapter of his story, right? That we get, he pimps out his woman, right? And he's a liar, and I mean, he's just, and then within a chapter or two, he's already forcing himself on his woman, on his enslaved people, like this enslaved woman Hagar, like right out of the gate, right? Anyway, okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I get that all humans are messy, but he picked those guys to get special treatment. Liars, cheaters. Yep, the worst guys, and get kills. Yep, 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 yep. All good stuff. Okay, so let's go to the part of the story that I was trying to refer to with the title of today's live stream, Isaac's underappreciated story. Um, okay, okay. So after these things, so all these things we've been talking about, you know, with being an alien in the land and lying to the king and getting away with it and justifying it by saying, I didn't think you would actually, I didn't think you were actually a good person. So I lied to you. Um, I didn't think I could trust you. So I lied to you. Uh, I'm going to force you to make a covenant with me. After all of those things, God tested Abraham. And this is, every now and then I'll come upon a line like that. Excuse me. And just I just kind of bemoan these lines, because after these things God tested Abraham, because the damage that particular line has done, it's just startling to me how many people read this uncritically and really do take what's happening in this chapter as an honest to goodness thing that God did, right? And that God would actually test anyone in this kind of a way, and therefore we should be okay with it. We should not be appalled by what's about to happen. God's just testing him. He's just testing Abraham to see if he's up for no. So anyway, so after these things, God tested Abraham. He said to Abraham, he said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am, Hineni, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you. So, as I pointed out just a second ago, he doesn't have just one son, Isaac. He has two sons. Ishmael is the older of the two, but he's been disowned. And so now we're going to pretend for the rest of the story that Ishmael doesn't actually exist, even though God said, I'm going to bless him too, make a great nation of him too, because he's your child. But Abraham himself, even God himself, is going to say that there's only one. Does make you wonder if the Abraham, Hagar, Ishmael thing is a later development that you would, what, your only son Isaac? Like, that's not even true. God is saying it. It's not even true, right? Uh, Unless, of course, since they've been disowned, he's got to pretend he needs to behave or act as if he only has one son. But it's coming from God's mouth. Like, it's just a weird thing to me. Anyway, okay, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to this place and offer him up as a burnt offering. So Abraham rose. I mean, it's the most startling story if you're reading this with any kind of clarity and critical thinking. There's no rejection. There's no pushback. Abraham isn't even allowed any words at this point. It's like God says to do it, and he just does. What? Like, I don't know a single parent who would do that, right? I don't know any parent who would do that. It's really appalling. And I try to think about, okay, so what kind of a setting would we be in where this kind of a story would be told and there would be this level of disrespect of human life, but that people would go along with it for the sake of the point of the story. Like, this is the premise. This is how we're setting things up, and nobody has a hard time with the story. So where are we? Are we sitting around a campfire, and somebody's like, "Well, this is a weird. Where's this headed?" But nobody pushes back. Like, how? Yeah. Anyway, okay. I'll just keep going. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took two of his young men with him and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering and set out and went to the place in the distance that God had shown him. I mean, I loved, I like to, you know, yeah, he had to sneak out early in the morning so that he didn't have to talk to Sarah about this. There's no way in hell she would have let him out the door, right? I just am really struck by it this time for some reason. That there's no give and take on this one. There's no back and forth. I mean, in chapter 18, God says, I'm going to destroy the whole town of Sodom. And Abraham's like, wait. What if there are 50 men in the town that are good? Like, they have this whole back and forth. And that was that was a city Abraham didn't even care about. This is his son. And he's not even flinching. On the third day, Abram looked up and saw the place far away. Then Abram said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. And the two of them walked on together. Isaac said to his father, Abraham, "Father." And he said, "Here I am, my son." Again, the same language as when God called out to test him at the beginning of the story. And he said, "The fire and the wood are here, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering?" Abram said, "God himself will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." And the two of them walked on together. When they came to the place that God had shown him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. I'm just having a hard time reading this out loud. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. I mean, so many questions, right? Why isn't Isaac fighting? Why is he going along with this charade? With the angel, then Abram reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. What does the footnote say there? Or to slaughter, yeah. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, said, Abraham, Abraham. And he replied, Here I am. So it's the same phrase again. Hineni. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. I mean, it is utterly disgusting, right, to think about a God who would ask this of someone, and that would be the way you would show your loyalty. So Abram looked up and saw a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. Abram went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abram called the place, The Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. Jehovah Jireh. Yeah. Yeah. Yireh could be to see. So it could be, as the footnote says, or will see. The Lord will see, or the Lord will provide. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son. 3 times in this story, Isaac has been called his only son. I will indeed bless you, and I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of their enemies, and by your offspring shall all the nations of the earth gain blessing for themselves, because you have obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba, the place where Abraham manipulated Abimelech, and Abraham lived at Beersheba. Yeah, so many questions, right? There's no way that a child would just let themselves be bound like that. I mean, I don't care how young he was, right? That all these great promises are added to the promises already given, right? I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars in heaven, the sands and the seashore. I will bless you like I've promised. I will actually do it, right? Because you've not withheld your son. You've obeyed my voice. This issue of obedience, right? Uh, on so many levels, many of these stories are only appropriate, are the kind of the message the behaviors they're trying to establish are very much about behaviors you're trying to instill in children in terms of obedience, black and white, kind of right and wrong. Anyway, not for grown-up people. Obeying my voice, like, you don't talk to adults like that. You don't actually talk to them. You know what I mean? Like, you don't. God is condescending, right? It's a very condescending thing. You've listened to my voice. You've obeyed me. Therefore, I will bless you. Very paternalistic. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just okay. We don't have any kind of conversation about how this went down for Isaac. We don't have any kind of what was dinner like for them back at home. How did Sarah respond when they got home? Like, we don't have, okay, let's just keep going. Now, after these things, it was told Abraham, Milcah also has borne children to your brother Nahor. Uz, the firstborn, totally out of nowhere, right? Uz, the firstborn, Buz, his brother, Kemuel, the father of Aram, Chesed, Hazo, Pildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. Bethuel became the father of Rebekah. Supposedly Kemuel. So Bethuel is Milcah, is Nahor's grandson. So I'm not sure if Kemuel, if there are three children that Milcah bears, and then Kemuel is the father of these, and then Bethuel is the father of Rebekah, so that Rebekah is actually great granddaughter of Nahor. Anyway, these eight, oh no, oh, okay. Let's just keep reading. It answers the question. These eight Milcah bore to Nahor, Abram's brother. Okay, good. So it's just Nahor's granddaughter, Rebekah. Just. And Rebekah's going to marry Isaac, right? These eight Milcah bore to Nahor, Abraham's brother. Moreover, his concubine, so the woman he has around just for sex, whose name was Ruma, bore Teba, Gaham, Tahash, and Maacah. And we get no follow-up. The rest of the story is just Sarah lived 127 years. This was the length of Sarah's life. And Sarah died at Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Close this. Abraham rose up from beside his dead and said to the Hittites, so he had to travel to go be with her when she died, meaning Sarah left him behind after what he did with Isaac, maybe, right? Anyway, so we're not gonna keep reading here at this point. But nothing, right? Nothing. All this happens. All this traumatic stuff happens to Isaac, and just terribly traumatic stuff happens to Isaac. And that's it. There's no follow-up on that. There's nothing. It's just one of the most horrific things I can imagine someone asking a parent to do just to prove a point or just to prove that he's loyal. Isaac gets no voice in the story except for the one question, and his father lies to him. So Abraham is just a liar, and a psychopath that he would even consider binding up his son in order to, no more Father's Day cards for you, Abraham. Terrible. Family dinner's just going to be awful after that. Yeah, so much. The behaviors of men, the horrific behaviors of men that we justify for larger causes. The fact that this is, as you all have said, this is the patriarch of this whole tradition behaving this way, and people just ignore it and find ways to accommodate it. So if they can do, when your faith tradition teaches you to do that, right? For this patriarch, any of these patriarchs who have just behaved badly, right? No wonder people are so good at doing that with the humans around them too, right? People have been taught, in Jewish and Christian, and I assume in Muslim contexts, to just, ways to justify horrific behaviors because there's a bigger there's a bigger picture here, or there's a greater purpose or whatever. Somehow it's all justified because it works out okay in the end for our side or whatever. And then, of course, as many of you know, this act of obedience, right? Not of like this. There's nothing brave about this. There's nothing courageous. There's nothing that we should be proud of Abraham for in this story. He doesn't reject the test in any way. And according to the narrative, there's nothing in the narrative that says he balks at this test. I lost my train of thought. This is not a man to emulate, but we find ways to do that. We're taught, right? So this is the story that proves his faithfulness, and that this is the story that the tradition in the Newer Testament is going to refer to when it talks about Abraham's great faith, that he trusted God would provide an animal instead of him having to kill his son. This is the story we're talking about. He had great faith. No, he's a psychopath. He's a sociopath. Like, that's not faith. Faith is trusting that is not doing it at all and trusting that God would find a different way. Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, that just, it's so appalling. And so since it is so central for Christian ideas and writings, right? Book of Hebrews, chapter 11 talks about, Abraham's great faith. I'm like, great faith? No. But because of that, right, this story is important. People need to be able to be okay with this horrific ask, this horrific way of testing people. No wonder people today have these weird ideas about people's suffering, and that suffering is just God testing you, or, whatever stupid things people say, right? God's just testing you. God's just making you stronger. Like, no, fuck off. I don't want anything to do with that God. No, that's not appropriate. Anyway, yeah, why don't we talk about Isaac? Why don't we talk about the therapy he's going to need, to be able to have his own children and have any kind of a healthy relationship whatsoever with them? Which he doesn't, by the way. He doesn't really have a good relationship with his children either. Poor guy. And he's, tricked out of his own. He's tricked by his own woman. Like, his own woman, like, tricks him, lies to him. I also think that there's a reason to read that story through the lens of patriarchy, and not just Rebecca is not great. I mean, she's scheming, right? Yeah. But again, I want to ask why. Why does she have to be, right? Why does she need to be? Anyway, that's for another day. Thank you, all of you who are here today. And chit chat, doing a little chit chat. So that's it. We're going to wrap up, and we'll pick up on chapter 23 of Genesis and get into Isaac and his own dysfunctional family next time. But next week, I actually am going to have a scholar on. Her name is Valerie Bridgman. She's a dean at her seminary, as well as faculty. She teaches preaching, actually, homiletics. She has a business called Woman Preach, and she's just a really lovely, lively person, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation with her next week about her work. And I'm not entirely sure what we're going to talk about. I need to look into the work she does, or some of the scholarship she's written. But she's at a United Methodist seminary, which is very social justice oriented, and so I don't know. We'll get into an interesting conversation, I think, next week. And I think I might be doing a couple more live streams kind of in between and over the next few weeks, just to get through the rest of Genesis here. And so anyway, we'll see what happens. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all the ways you all support me and help me here. It's fun to see you all in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Oh, wait, There it is. Nope. Nope. There it is. Okay. All right. Thanks. See you next time.